know I enjoy teaching. So given the opportunity, I'm going to say yes. This is a topic new for me, but I was excited to dig in because I fit that demographic of being a Gen Xer and a millennial, depending upon which graph or years you're looking at. There's lots of reports out there. So I fit into both. And I actually had this discussion with my husband, and he's like, you are a Gen Xer, because I lived in a part of the country that did not get technology as fast as other parts of the country. I actually grew up on a small farm. And while other places had, internet, we didn't. It took us about 10 years to get the internet in our part of the country before anyone else did. Same with dial-up. My parents basically had dial-up until about 10 years ago. They were really, really behind the times, and just recently got into the cell phones that actually are not flip phones and are smartphones. And really interesting, different parts of the country, you could be a Gen Xer, because Gen Xers had millennials had more access to technology, but I didn't growing up. So I still relate to the Gen X generation. But my school had it. So I got my first computer. I think I jumped on 4th grade, something like that. So there was a lot of access there. But I do find when we start labeling generations, yes, there are some really great common themes, but then we get some wrong, depending upon where you grew up and the family you grew up in. Well, let's see how many people we have here right now. We got a small group, 8 participants. Fantastic. Oh, plus the recording. Well, we'll go ahead and get started, everyone. As part of this Commissioner College of Science, we are doing BCS 114, which is Understanding Communicating with Today's Leaders. It's something we do every day. And I really hope that at the end of today's lesson, you can get some more tools for your toolbox to help you reach out to some of those leaders that you haven't been able to, find some commonality, and do some additional recruiting for your units, and at least help those units you are working with and pass on this knowledge and information. I think it is just about being aware of who we are working with, some of their background, and being able to connect with them, because we all come from different backgrounds. And that connection is really, really important as we recruit for this new generation of scouting. As part of getting to know you a little bit better, we would like to take a quick survey. And it's going to be really fun. And this kind of jumps into a little bit of the millennials. They're all about technology today. So they have cell phones. They're on the computers all the time. And I want to challenge each of us to see if we can branch into a little technology today. If you've got a cell phone, I would like you to scan this QR code with your cell phone. If you don't have a cell phone, that's okay. You can still participate by going to a URL browser on the internet and typing in pollev.com/SandraSmith128. So if everyone could take a few minutes and join me. Does anyone have questions on how to scan this QR code? The best way is just to open your camera and scan it, and then the camera was going to give you a little link. If you're like me, I actually have a barcode scanner app that scans for me. So I'm just going to take my little camera and put it on there. And it says open, and I'm going to open the. Okay, our first question. Growing up at home, what were some of your favorite TV shows or radio programs? You can enter as many as you'd like. And I'm going to participate with you guys because I love sharing some of my favorite shows together. Great technology here. So many ways to participate. Ooh, Brady Bunch, Twilight Zone, Bonanza.
Somebody threw in what was it, Smurfs, and I was like, oh, there's a whole series of Saturday morning cartoons that I can't think of right now.
Teddy Ruxpin, Ninja Turtles,
Gummy Bears,
Glowworms, Strawberry Shortcake. Okay, you and me, Joseph, we're the same generation.
Yep, we're there together.
Okay, that's
It was
great.
back when there was Saturday morning cartoons.
It's true. It's
Now
true.
there's just Commissioner College.
I love it. I love it. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next question. Next one is, as a teenager, what was your favorite music or band? We'll just take about 30 seconds. I want to see everyone's answers. I'm from the Garth Brooks generation. I'm curious what your definition of oldies was. Every generation has different oldies, whether that's oldies country, oldies rock. Okay, nice. Air Supply, Beatles, Weezer. Thank you, everybody. Let's move on to the next question. As a child, what was your favorite game you remember playing?
Favorite game.
I played Monopoly a lot. Oh, sorry. Yep. Twister did that. Anyone play categories? I have to remember how to spell that. I love it. Busy with cows. You were a farmer too. So was I. Excellent. Some fun little games. Red Rover. So back when we had to be outside and came up with our own games. I love it. Couple categories there. Okay, next question. What famous person do you really admire or did really admire when you were younger? This should add a couple generational answers here. Got a couple Mr. Rogers. It's bigger because multiple people answered that one. Oh, David O. McKay. Like it. John F. Kennedy. Kennedy, teachers. I'm going to say LeVar Burton as well. Reading Rainbow was one of my favorites.
Well, then there's Big Bird and Snuffleupagus and Oscar the Grouch, and all those Sesame Street characters that seem to teach good messages.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, everybody. We'll go ahead and move on to the next question. We'll just have one more after this. What is a historic event that had a great impact on you? Challenger. Yeah, my father would tell me about that experience.
I remember sitting in school watching it explode.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? 9/11 was, we were all alive then, but it was something that may not have been the first big national event that you had experienced, but it was for some. I think our millennials, that was very shocking for their generation. The Kennedy
some other ones were the Gulf War, the first one and the second one. Yeah. Watching that kind of roll out, I think I remember watching stuff at school where they're talking about what's going on and what's happening in the newsfeed thing.
I think this that definitely proves that we're shaped by the history that we experience. Landing on the moon, that must have been so amazing. I'd love to hear stories about watching that on TV. Okay, one last question, and then we can get on to the content. Select your generation. We've had an opportunity to go through several questions that hopefully would identify what generation you're from, but let's find out for real. Based upon these numbers, now I know it changes depending upon what source you're looking at, but using these dates, what are you? And unfortunately, I have to hit millennial, even though I'm not a millennial. Great. That's no post millennials today. Oh, darn it. Great. Thank you guys so much. I love learning about people and about where you're from. And I hopefully you had a little fun with this. Technology is out there allowing us to share commonality and understanding together. So I hope you enjoyed this little survey and get to know each other and who we have on this call today. I'm going to go ahead and bring up our presentation now. Okay, so by the end of this session, you should be able to identify generations within the scouting leaders, understand the differences in relating to Gen X and Millennials, which is what we're going to focus on today, and then embrace those differences and similarities. Just a few minutes ago, we performed a quick little survey, got to know each other and who we have on the call. And here is how these generations are defined based upon the source that was used for this presentation. Every generation is influenced by its periods, economical, political, and civil events, social events. We've learned that there's the Great Depression, the Civil Rights Movement, the Women's Movement, the advanced technology such as television and computers. Everything like that affects each generation. And so generation shaping trends are most influential as people come of age, which really means as they are developing their values, their beliefs, and their expectations are shaped by these events. But it is important to remind each of you that at an individual level, everyone is different. But by looking at the people as a generation lens or through a generational lens, we're able to usefully predict some of those things that they're most likely to reach for, be informed about, or even help us better recruit for our types of scouting events. Does any of these dates or titles, are these new to you? I think in scouting, we've taken many opportunities, whether it be Wood Badge or IOLS, to talk about generations. I think one thing that surprised me is we've now combined the greatest generation and the silent generation into the matures. That was brand new for me. I didn't know that change had happened.
Well, and I think you mentioned earlier that based on where you grew up, some of this generational stuff has shifted because you got technologies, events happen differently for you. And so again, even these dates are different than what was in the survey question.
Yep.
Of when those ranges are. And so a lot of that changes, and it depends on maybe who your parents were, what generation they were a part of, which one you kind of got pushed towards, forward or back, or
exactly,
or how involved everybody was in your life, grandparents, parents.
If you were raised by your grandparents, you might have different values than if you were raised by your parents. Yeah, exactly. And we see that today in our millennials. Some are being raised in either single parent families or being raised by grandparents. So they may have different values. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So we already played this quick little game to get to know each other. And thank you so much for participating. We want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about some statistics of the United States. Most of these were conducted in 2020, and I don't want to spend too much time on it as our main focus is how we connect to this generation, but I think it's important to note where this is coming from. So this graph basically shows for the US population in 2020, looking at generations today, 20% are Gen Xers and 25% are millennials. That's 50% of our population this day that are parents of our scout aged youth. This one shows a little bit of the distribution of race and ethnicity in the United States by population. I think this one was about 2018. So it's changed slightly since then, but not too much. One important characteristic to note here of this new generation, they are the most diverse. You can see that the younger generation has a growing representation in cultures that are not traditionally BSA members, and this trend will continue. According to the Bureau of Land Statistics, about 1 in 4 Americans volunteered through an organization. That's nearly 2/3 that helped their neighbors last year, demonstrating that service to others continues to be a priority for millions, despite the drop in numbers. So there are some bright spots and generational surprises in these stats. Gen Xers, right there, contribute the most and are the biggest volunteer generation. Any idea why?
I think it's because of the way they were taught.
Mm-hmm. I think it does have a lot to do with the way that they were raised. I can talk from experience that my father and mother taught me the importance of hard work and being willing to share with others. So we grew up pretty poor, and so we often would share our wealth with others, our excess with others. And even this day, I have no reason to be a volunteer in scouting other than I enjoy it so much and I want to help the future generation. I personally don't have children, and I know a lot of people choose to volunteer because they have children in scouting. But here I am still volunteering without that connection to my own child. So I definitely feel that obligation to help others.
Percentage-wise, Sandra, between Gen X and Boomers, they're pretty close.
Mm-hmm, they are.
And so
the Gen Xers are raised by Boomers, so hopefully they would have passed on that value of volunteerism.
Right.
And I also think it has to do with time. We didn't have access to a lot of technology. So what else are we going to do with our time? We would go out and find ways to serve. And now if you're just stuck to a screen, you got to make time to do that. Okay, quickly, I'm going to run through the rest of these slides so we can get to some additional topics here. This is about volunteering demographics. And I think a lot of this has to do with the time of life. And if you notice, the boomers and the Gen Xers and the matures volunteer and donate a lot of money. And that's because in their lifetime, they've had jobs. They have the ability to donate, whereas Gen Xers and millennials don't. So there's some things we can probably gauge from this based upon the time of life they're in. So boomers have more time to give. They may be able to contribute more financially, but may not be able to, do so many things for their neighbors. So these generations were raised with an expectation of volunteerism. Community service was basically required in schools. And it also weighed very heavy on college applications. So extracurricular activities was something I was required to put on my college application. And then organizations to support. When choosing an organization to support, 58% consider an organization's cause, while 38% consider its mission, and 3% consider the history of the organization. So I feel like this slide is just telling us it's not about the history of the organization, it's more about the cause. And clearly, millennials don't care if the BSA has been around 100 years, but they do care about what it offers our youth. And that's what we need to help convey to those that we are recruiting. One challenge will be to get the parents to see that scouting is a cause that will help build their child into a competent, contributing member of society. Okay, so let's get to a little bit talking about the parents of scouts and their volunteers. As I mentioned earlier, this course is really just centered mostly about Gen Xers and millennials. And as commissioners, we need to look at the characteristics of the Gen Xers and millennials and how we can understand the environment they were raised in and the challenges they are facing today. And that will help us when communicating with the leaders in our units and also recruiting for new and younger commissioner staff. Understanding is the key. We can foster a consensus model in which all of our players work in concert with each other for a common goal of scouting, and foster the conflict model, which we work against other components. So being inclusive, understanding the groups and how they want their children to be involved in extracurricular activities. And I think that if we can do that, we're going to be stronger as an organization. So how can we connect with millennials and Gen Xers too? What are some ideas that you guys have?
Well, from a baby boomer, I need to know and understand the generation that is now being raised, how they perspect things. And so sometimes as baby boomers, we kind of take the lead on our own. And in today's millennials, I think it's harder to at least have them understand from where I'm coming from as a baby boomer, and for me to understand them coming from the millennial kind of group. Okay, what is the difference?
Right.
As far as thinking, did that make sense?
It does. Yeah, you've got to put yourself in their shoes.
Right.
Right. And that empathy is where we can make that connection. Judy, yes.
I think too is being in the baby boomers is we have to learn the technology that the Gen X and millennials answer to.
Yep.
They will more readily answer a text than they will a phone call.
Exactly. That communication channel changes depending upon what generation you're trying to reach out to. For me, it's been fun to learn a lot of these new games that are online and to be able to implement technology into my training and into my classroom to make it fun and exciting for not only the youth, but also the parents, because they want to see us embracing that technology in scouting. But they also want to see us go outside and take away that technology because maybe their kids are on it a little too much at home. So having that integration between getting outside and using technology to teach. Other ideas?
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say other ideas. Go ahead, Joseph.
Well, I was thinking too, as commissioners, a lot of it is bringing them the tools they can use, which for those of us that are a little bit older, Sandra and I are the young ones here. Means it's a learning curve for us to learn how to use the tool so we can share it with them so they can use the tool with the youth that understand it and get it and are already there. And it's kind of, so there's a bigger learning curve, like Judy mentioned, on our end to get it to them so that they can use it. And sometimes I guess it's modernizing what we've always used to make it fit in their world, because we live in the old world and they want to move to a different one. And we have to bring our tools to them or they're not going to listen.
Yeah, we do have to be open and adaptable.
We appreciate your use of old world.
I
also lived on those dial-up.
Yeah. Being open, having open discussion with people, generational conversations shouldn't be awkward. They really should just be open and honest. Here's how you can communicate with me the best, and be open to take that feedback and say, oh, I like that. Can you tell me? If I don't know what that communication tool is, I don't know if you've heard of GroupMe, but it's a group text app that you can send to multiple people. And a lot of our scouting units are using it now. I wasn't familiar with it at first. So I had to go and learn about this tool because a parent said, this is what I need. And this is what works for me in other groups. Can you embrace it? And taking that time to be open. Yeah, let me go ahead and research this tool. I think this is great. It's now on my phone. I communicate with my parents all through GroupMe. And now I use it in other organizations too. There's technology coming out all the time, and we just need to be able to adapt and be open to it. So on this particular question on how we can connect with millennials, a couple of other suggestions are ask for more than money. Because it's not always about money when it comes to connections. Parents will often sign up and volunteer their time for fundraising or field work or doing anything else other than contributing money. Sometimes it's time, and they're okay with that. Telling stories. The space is very, very crowded. We are competing for time. There are so many extracurricular activities that a youth can participate in. How can we spotlight ourselves? And one of the ways is to tell a story. Make it personal. Talk about a personal story that you've had or a youth has had to really bring to life what scouting is going to offer our youth. Rather just saying how many people are affected, show how someone's been affected, and tell a personal story about how you were affected by scouting. Again, keep it simple. Our cause should be tweetable. I thought that was interesting. This was added. If you're not familiar with Twitter, then maybe you should be. Something you want to be able to repeat and share over and over again. Avoid overcomplicating scouting and its message. Stick to the really high points, what our overall goal is, our mission, and just say that, keep it simple. And once they get in, then we can start complicating things. Just kidding. And then communication. And I think we've already talked on that, is really understanding how to communicate with them.
So Sandra, so Judy and I, in our day, we face-to-face a lot because that was our communication.
Mm-hmm.
But today, I'm learning to use the cell phone while I'm sitting across the table to text to my grandson or my son or whatever.
Yeah.
Back and forth. And when you talk about getting to know and understand where they're right now, as far as, because technology today is just so sophisticated that I don't know how Judy is, but myself, I find myself, I'm running behind the times because I often am calling either my grandkids or my kids. Tell me, okay, well, in fact, you helped me out with a situation of mine because I couldn't understand it. But I think that we need to get to that level, like Joseph was saying, because if we don't, we kind of lose, in my mind anyway, we kind of lose that interpersonality from face to face.
I agree. And I think face-to-face is still extremely important, but it's not the only option we have today.
Correct.
So Sandy, you need to define tweetable. There's a number of us that may not be into that whole genre.
Sure. I actually am not a big Twitter use. I tried it for a time. It is a social media app that once you enter a tweet, you send it out into the ether, and then if someone likes it, they'll share it. And I think one of the big things about Twitter is you can share something very, very quickly, and it goes what's called viral, where the whole world sees something. So something big happens and you want to share it with other people. People have that opportunity to get to thousands of individuals to see that message very, very quickly. And that's what we'd like scouting to be, is we want that message to be loud and clear and be shared among everybody we know and love because we enjoy the experience so much.
Is there a limitation on length?
I don't know that. I've never tried it.
There used to be. There used to be 140 characters. I don't know what it is now. I think they changed it to something longer, but it used to be short.
I mean, being from the baby boomer generation, we tend to lengthen things out.
Right.
And so when you said be tweetable, it's like, okay, this has got to be a little bit more defined for me. So
I love it. Yeah, short and sweet. I think that's also the message there. Short and sweet. Be tweetable.
It's also where if you're into the Twitter thing as well, is where you find the term hashtag. Hashtags in Twitter are a way to tag something with it's related to this, or it's on this topic, or stuff like that. So that's where that term comes from as well.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things this slide is trying to demonstrate is the # millennials be tweetable. Yep. I think that's a great segue there. One thing else before I move on to the next slide is I feel like it has been said so much and written about that millennials have an entitlement and an apathy. But I think millennials are the furthest thing from a passive audience. They want to be involved. They want to have passion about our community, and they want to be involved in volunteer activities. They want to go see the outdoors. I feel like scouting is the answer to a lot of that. And we may be too generalizing the millennials when we say they are entitled. I've heard that a lot. And I hope that we can get away from those type of labels when we talk about the generations, because we need them. And we really should kind of maybe talk about them in a more positive light.
Well, and I was going to add too, we touched on it briefly. One of the aims of scouting is that they work with adults.
Mhm.
They learn to work with adults. And I think it goes both ways. We have to learn to work with them, but they also need to, maybe it's a frank conversation of, look, I don't tweet. If you want to reach me, don't tweet at me. I'm never going to see it because I'm not there. So this is, again, it's both ways. We need to reach their tools, but they need to also come back and say, the best way to reach me is to knock on my door or pull me aside at a meeting and talk to me, because that's how I'm going to communicate.
Yep, it does go both ways. Thank you for sharing that, Joseph. My next slide, it talks about just a couple of words that have been known to characterize millennials. Of course, every individual is different, and many people are affected by other elements. So this is not meant to categorize an individual. And I'm sure that you'll see these actually are characteristics that can cover many, many generations. So that said, this research often narrows it down to 7 characteristics that differentiate the millennials from the previous generation, which would have been Gen Xers. Special, confident, achieving, sheltered, team-oriented. So when you see these words, what do you think? Do any of these, do they seem accurate for you? One of the ones that I was curious about was pressured. And looking this up, I do feel like we've put a lot of pressure on millennials to step up and do something different. And I think every generation has had the expectation of being the future leaders, as the previous generation has put that pressure on them. We want them to excel at everything they do, and maybe they're not always meeting up to that expectation, so they feel that pressure.
Well, and I think that goes along with sheltered and achieving as well as and special, that they're, I guess maybe that entitlement thing is that they're a special snowflake is the current meme of the day for that they're special in a certain way and they're the only one like that. And the previous generations, it's no, we're all in this together. Your speciality isn't particularly special. It's just different, and we all have to still work together. And sheltered same way. They maybe didn't have all the opportunities that previous generations had. They're not outdoors as much because their phone doesn't travel outdoors as easily. The internet's not as available outdoors.
Right. You've got the helicopter parents.
Helicopter parents. And so they're, again, pressured and sheltered there at the same time. And achieving, I'm kind of on the, I don't know, most of these to me seem negative terms applied to them. Some of them,
achieving.
Maybe not. But achieving it, they live in the generation of everybody gets an award.
Right.
Whether they earned it or were special enough, overachieving to actually earn an award. Everybody gets an award. So it's kind of I don't know, it's a mixed bag of what these terms mean and how they apply to millennials specifically.
Agreed. So we're going to move on.
Just one quick question, though, Sandra. I want to just add to that, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think a lot of times, because I find in my own units that confidence, they need to have some confidence to help them to continue on with what we have, what we're expecting of them. Because at least I have seen several of the youth within the units, they're shy. They're more shy than they are they're lacking that confidence that they can do it.
Yeah.
If they really want to try.
Agreed. Thank you so much for sharing. The next slide is about millennial parents. So one of the largest and most diverse generations in the history of the world. Single parents make about 26% are married versus their baby boomer parents were about 48%. They are very tech savvy, and there's no value gaps really between millennials and their children. You'll find they're buying the same clothes, they're sharing their same music, they're watching the same movies. They're all very passionate. So I think that's something interesting, is that the parents and their children are very similar. Here is the characteristics of Generation X. I won't spend nearly as much time here, but go ahead and take a look at them. This is the overlooked generation. It spans only about 16 years, which may be one of the reasons why they're often missing from stories about demographics and social and political change. They are smack in the middle of innings of life, which tend to be short on drama and scant of theme. I find that interesting to talk about Gen Xers that way, being a Gen X myself. There's other explanations that have nothing to do with the stage of their life cycle. They are bookended by two very, very large generations, the baby boomers and the millennials. But they have their own characteristics. So we've got savvy, small generation, skeptical, self-reliant. Any comments about these descriptions of Generation X?
My thought was a lot of times, I don't know, sometimes I will say I'm a very skeptical person of what's out there. Unless I can see it and touch it, I don't believe in it as much. And maybe that's a relationship of my parents being boomers and the times that we lived in and we were born into and things we've experienced. Self-reliant, again, I think the 80s, the 70s and the 80s were rough on economy and people didn't have extra things. So if you wanted something, you had to figure out how to go do it.
Yeah.
And get it. I also think you were mentioning that we're kind of left out of the surveys and some of the data because we're also just kind of silent about stuff. Our opinions weren't important as a kid because we didn't matter, kind of a thing. And so we keep that to ourselves. And yeah, we have opinions, but we don't share them broadly and we don't speak out about stuff. We just get to it and go get it done and move on.
I also feel like we really don't care what other people think of us. We just go out and do it.
Yep.
That's a different characteristic. So I'm going to move on. Life really hasn't been stable for Gen Xers. They're known as the latchkey generation due to the fact they often took care of themselves after school. That was me. My parents weren't home most of the time. And my parents worked long hours to provide for us. Thus, as a group, they're known as to be very independent. So we need to remember that when we're recruiting and assigning duties. They are very dependable. They are likely to be resistant to micromanagement. And when recruiting, we should highlight how Gen Xers are volunteers and can help in any way and be very dependable. We need to convince them that our organization is reliable and we will just simply not want to complicate their lives.
And I would add too, we're also very rule driven. Because we were left home and independent, there were very strict rules set of these are the things you can do, and these are the lines you do not cross, or there is serious trouble at home. Exactly.
So watch them, give them an assignment, see what they'll do with it. They are very creative as well. Gen Xers as volunteers, I won't spend too much time on this. Types of organizations that Gen Xers volunteer for are educational youth services, religious, social and communication, community service. BSA is all of these and above. We need to let them know that. And they are working in fundraising or selling something to raise money. Commonly, they're collecting, preparing, or serving food, tutoring, and teaching. So BSA includes all of these volunteer opportunities as well. We need to let them know. They are a what's in it for me. So we need to help tell them what's in it for them. Because this is the way the generation has been raised and it's their pattern, they're looking for how it can benefit them and their children. So that's okay. BSA just needs to let them know that this is their direct return, an investment in their child's future. So where do we find these parents, volunteers, and new Cub Scouters in the BSA? Traditionally, in the past, we've looked at public schools. We've looked at civic organizations. We've looked at faith-based organizations. But that's not where millennials are today. Where do you think they are? If you don't know, I'll give you the answer.
Are they in businesses and stuff like that where
Yeah.
they're not?
They are, and we'll get there in just a minute. So here are the old civic organizations. So most civic organizations are not growing. In fact, most no longer post their membership numbers for publicity, like the Lions, the American Legion, the FWA, the Moose, the Elks, the Rotary. They were popular when I was a kid, but they're not nearly as popular. The only one that actually is still growing is the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Clubs. They are one of the largest chartered organizations and support BSA in the past. So those should be our targets, the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Clubs. I don't think we have too many of those communities here in Utah. So we need to be thinking about those organizations that are similar. Faith-based organizations, the decline in membership of faith-based organizations is not surprising, considering that overall today, among adults who are 25 to 35, only about 25% have no religious affiliation, 22% identify with a non-denominational church, 8% identify with other religions, and 55% of millennials are not in a large traditional market of religion. And I think that may differ here in Utah based upon the prominent religion we have here, but I feel like it's still dropping a lot for those millennials. So we may not use just the church or the religion aspect for recruiting. So if they're not in traditional markets, where can we find them? Social networks. We talked a little bit about those earlier, such as Twitter, but they're online. So we need to find a way to increase our presence online. They don't need to join an organization. They can just join a Facebook page to get involved with their community. Millennials say their main source for news, 65% is from television and 59% is from the internet. So if we find ways to connect with them through technology like Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, texting, tweeting, they're never without their smartphones. So they're so close to connecting and seeing messages that we're sending. So to keep up, to even be noticed by this new generation, councils and districts will need to become more involved in their communities and have a social presence. And that's where we can advertise community service opportunities, service projects, our causes, get them involved. And we can continue that communication through those social networks, texting, and smartphones. I can tell you the last few years, we've been creating troop Facebook pages, PAC Facebook pages, with badge Facebook pages to allow us to communicate directly with our participants and our staff to help the cause continue. And don't forget appealing to parents and new cubs and their grandparents. So just to wrap up, remember, millennials, they get along well with their parents and they usually stay at home. Do they want their kids in scouting? Yes, but they may not know it. So that's our job as commissioners, is to get that word out of what we can offer, what our cause is, and how we can help them. Be confident, connected, and be open to change. So there's my course summary. Hooray, I made it 1 minute left. There are several generations active in scouting. As we can tell from this call today, we've got several generations. And I think in most of the meetings and trainings we go to, that is the case. Let's be open. Let's talk to each other. Let's see what our wants are and how we can better connect with each generation. So that is my challenge to each of you. Embrace those differences, those similarities, and find how we connect and get the new generation active in scouting. Any questions? We got 30 seconds left. Thank you guys so much.
Senator, that was a great job, because there's stuff there that you've given that I can actually now use. It's going to help me out with not only our youth, but our leaders to
Agreed.
help better contact between the two generations.
It's just being aware.
Yep.
And once we're aware, we can come up with a solution.
Yep.
I appreciate your participation today, everyone. It was a really great discussion. It helped me a lot, and I think we have a long ways to go.